On behalf of Citizens Climate Lobby Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today. Where I am, in the Bennelong electorate of Sydney, they are the Wallamadigal people of the Darug Nation. For you, the land you are on and the traditional custodians of that land will most likely be different. I wish to acknowledge their continuing connection to country and community and pay my respect to elders past and present. I recognise the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first Australians. I'm committed to honouring their unique cultural and spiritual relationship to the land, air, waters and seas, as well as their rich contribution to society. I also acknowledge that sovereignty, land and law of First Nations peoples were never ceded. True to the core values of Citizens Climate Lobby, as part of embodying integrity, we continuously seek to improve our understanding. In embracing diversity, we find opportunities to support and elevate the voices of those who may not be fully heard. This includes our First Nations peoples. To them, country is much more than a place. Paluku woman Amberlyn Quaimulina explains their deeply spiritual connection to land. Aboriginal law and spirituality are intertwined with the land, the people and creation, and this forms our culture and sovereignty. Country is filled with relations, speaking language and following law, no matter whether the shape of that relation is human, rock, crow, or wattle. Country is loved, needed, and cared for, and country loves, needs, and cares for her peoples in return. Country is family, country is identity, country is culture, country is self. The health of the land and water is central to our culture. Land is our mother. Land is steeped in our culture, but also gives us the responsibility to care for it. We feel the pain of life in country as pain to the self. While most of us are not Indigenous people living in place, we are all Indigenous to this earth. Numba Gambanga elder Runga Dungia describes how non-Indigenous people can connect with country. He says, simply connect and care. Where you were born or the land you adopt is where you are from. Everything's connected. We are all connected. The realization of this profoundly changes the relationship with nature and self. I'll finish by sharing a message from Wardaman woman, Dr. Josie Douglas, who is witnessing firsthand the impacts of climate change to country, where she is in the top end. We can't keep going on the way we're going. Without action to stop climate change, my people are already being forced to leave their country and leave behind much of what makes them Aboriginal. Climate change is a clear and present threat to survival of our people and culture. This is at the heart of why we're all here on this call. We care strongly about climate change and we want to be part of the solution. Today, you will learn more about how to do just that. So I ask you to keep in mind this question. In taking action on climate change, how can you strengthen your personal connection to country? This can help us to remain grounded in these challenging times and remind us what we're all fighting for. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed today's conference. I'll hand it back to Tom now.
Thank you very much, Jordan. What a brilliant acknowledgement. Our aims are targets. Now, I was inspired by Angus Taylor. It's a tough one because if anybody's read what Angus has been talking about recently, it's hard to feel inspired, but I was inspired for one thing, and this talk has come of it, and we'll see as we go through. We're all about targets. I don't know whether you've noticed that our logo is actually an arrow going into a target. And so it's an important thing to understand that, yes, a target is important to us. What are our aims, our targets in life, I thought? We have lots of different things that draw our attention, that we have in mind as we set through our life. Good health and good food and family. Of course, we always want a dream job. So we love to have big house, flashy car. And one of our real important aims that we often don't think about until we actually have a few of them is that we want to give children the best start they can have in life. That's probably our most important aim in society when you think about it. But we all have targets to think about and to work on. And when we have a target, then we then put together ideas on how we might achieve those targets, and we strive, we plan, and we implement those plans. And then you may, if you're lucky, have success at the end of that. But the planning always, to my mind, came after the target. So this is where Angus has inspired me, because he said, just last week, he said, to set a target without a plan is foolish. And I thought, how can any intelligent person say such a thing? It does not make sense. Does not make sense. And this man is he's a Rhodes Scholar. He should know better than to suggest such a thing, because he's talking about the target of net zero emissions by 2050. So I say that's nonsense, but how do we relate to that? We've got to try and communicate and talk to this man, and we won't be able to communicate with him if we go into him telling he's foolish. If he is seeing us as an adversary, but we won't be able to relate. Even if he hears us, he won't listen. Is the problem. And so, but then it got me thinking, well, maybe it's because really he has another target. What are his other targets? And this is something we need to understand if we want to be able to communicate with all our politicians. It's not the top target for them. Zero emissions by 2050 is the top target for us, but for them, it is not. And we have to raise the ante. We have to make it that it is. So I thought, well, what are society's aims? Is this not what government should be doing? Supporting society's aims? I haven't got the time to go through those in detail, but you get the idea. And a stable climate is a certainty within there if we want to have a long-term society on this planet. So what are our government's aims? What are they trying to do? What is their priority? Clearly, they've got the key ones. They want to do this stuff to have the right things in place to help our society. They want to keep it peaceful. Growth is an interesting one. Growth is something we don't all agree on, but unfortunately, that seemed to be, if you remember the mantra of Tony Abbott and others after him, growth and jobs. It seemed to be the most important thing, and yet we don't see that that's necessarily a good thing. A strong economy. Now, this seems to be the biggest driver of all for government, certainly the current government. And of course, in order to support the strong economy, they support industry, business, mining, and agriculture, the things that make money for the country and employ people. And so you can understand that's their main aim, is to have the strong economy. They think they can do all of these other things if they have a strong economy. And growth is seen as part of that. But then if you look at what politicians' aims are, they get step one further. There are other things on their minds. Ambitions to improve Australia. They got into politics probably for a reason, and it generally isn't to line their own pockets. It's generally because they actually want to do something good for the country. But they can also have personal ambitions, and they're seeking recognition and seeking to have their ideal job. And of course, they support the constituents within their electorate. They're seeking votes. They're always thinking about that, you can tell. They want the support of the party and to give support to the party to stay in its good books. They want influence and support, so they work with people of influence. And that arrow next to them, the target next to them, industry, business, mining, and agriculture, people with money in that area tend to be in that influence and support area. But of course, they're all people just like us, and they have all the individual wants and needs and targets at that level too. So what's missing from this? Or why is there something missing? There's probably a few things missing. These are just ideas out of my head from the last few days. So what are the aims we need to add to this to get what we want? And of course, I think in the corner there where I can't see, there should be supporting our children into the future. And another, oh, there it goes there now. So that's an aim, a target that we need to add to this batch, which doesn't really appear to be there. And puzzle me because you'd think it should be there. The other thing is sustainability and stability. And there's a lot of talk about sustainability. That word gets overused. But the economists see that as a sustainable economy. They don't see that as a sustainable environment. And that's what is worrying too. And to my mind, we don't need growth. Growth is the last thing we need. We've already grown beyond what we need to be on this planet. We need to be stable. We need to settle at a nice level, improve quality, not quantity of life. So to get our message across, we need to understand, to empathize, and find ways and things that we do link to politicians with. Our speakers, I think Andrew especially this afternoon, will be telling us just how we can best do that in our lobbying efforts. And we need to share our ideals, share our ideas with those people of influence as well as all of society, so that we can get constituents and politicians on side to get those messages. So key messages that I wanted to go through are, and these are the things that are good to keep in your mind to be able to respond to arguments that are placed in front of you. The world needs to change. We have exponential growth in CO2 emissions, in all carbon emissions, and it hasn't stopped, despite the fact that it's a quarter of a century or more since the Kyoto Protocol was brought in place. The emissions have just continued going up. And look, people say, well, there's China and India that's doing all this because they're putting lots more in. Well, we were party to the Kyoto Protocol and the other things that have happened since then. And where were we arguing with China? Look, don't put more emissions in. Let us help you reduce your emissions. Even if it costs us, we need to do that. Well, that didn't happen. And look, it's still going up. And look, we need to change. The world needs to change. We're starting to hurt at just 1 degree. This dial shows you where we actually have the thermostat now set. We've got 4 degrees dialed in. Our human race has never seen the atmosphere with so much carbon in it. You can see the CO2 range for the last 800,000 years there. Well, we're now way above that, and we really don't know exactly how much that's going to affect us in all sorts of ways. 1 degree is hurting. What would 4 degrees do to us? And that's where we have the dial set. Australia is no small player. People argue that we can't have an effect, but we are no small player. You see that building there? Well, just to put us in context, we're only 1/300th of the world's population, 25 million out of 7.5 billion. We create 1/80th of the carbon pollution, so that's well above our punching rate. And we dig up 1/20th of the world's fossil fuels, so that's way, way above our share. And there's 600 million tons of coal, and to put that in context, the building you can see in that picture there, if we built a pyramid as tall as that tallest building in the world, and 1.4 kilometers across the base, which would smother that city, a pyramid of coal that big is how much Australia digs up and puts in the sky every year. That's 1/20th. So there's 20 times that going into the sky every year from our energy needs. In comparison, when you think of the Middle East as being the center of all this terrible carbon pollution, well, we're in the same ballpark. We're 2/3 of the amount of carbon coming out of Australia as comes out of the Middle East. So we are not a small player. We need to aim high. This graphic image from Will Stephan puts it in context. We've put so much into the sky, we've changed the warming rate, but we're now rolling down a hill towards our potential tipping point, or 2, or 3, or 4. The Arctic ice is virtually bare. West Antarctic ice sheets could go within the next 10 years. The Amazon forest could be completely lost in the next 15. Greenland ice sheet. And the list goes on. If we don't bring this back, we could go over the lip there and into the hothouse Earth that Will Stephan suggests could be in store for us and have no way out. So this is what we are worried about. We need to aim high. So our asks that we want to put to politicians are, we would like you to put the economic drivers in place that actually support our children. At the moment, future utility of the world in economic terms is discounted. The standard for for Australia is, for our government, is that a 7% per annum discount, I'm told, by John just the other day. So that would discount us to the point that any disaster in 20 years' time, for instance, is basically worthless to us. It doesn't count one zot towards our cost-benefit study. If we do a cost-benefit study on, hey, if we spend this much on climate change now and get that benefit in the future, that benefit is discounted to the point that it just has no value. Now, the best economists working on this front suggest a 1.4% discount per annum. But even that means that within 80 years or so, there's still no benefit. So a disaster in 80 years' time just doesn't count either. And that's not our current government. We don't measure the benefits of the future. Anything beyond a few years is just not worthy of mention. It's the way that economists see it. So the other thing is we're putting a lot into subsidizing fossil fuels. The International Monetary Fund estimates that we spend, in Australia alone, $29 billion a year, US. That's $2,000 for every man, woman, and child in Australia, going into supporting the fossil fuel industry. This is madness. I don't want that $2,000 going from me in there, quite frankly. It's a nonsense. That's enough money to be able to employ just about all of the people in the fossil fuel industry in Australia. So why are we doing that? It does not make sense. It's all to do with the economics. The economics is that 20% of Australia's exports are to do with coal, and therefore we're worried about losing that income. But look, we have to measure future problems from this. So enough on that. Carbon fee and dividend. We've seen this before, and we'll see it again. The most important ask that we can make, and we all support this, is that we should have a carbon fee and dividend in place, a fee on fossil fuels, return the revenue to households. That balances it out. There are no losers in this. The only people that would lose would be losing face because they knocked the carbon tax out a few years ago. We have to get them over that. This isn't a tax. This is a fee and dividend. So this is what we need to do. Another ask is to support Zali Steggall's bill. We'll learn more about that today. But looking at the main reason for the bill is to put in place a climate change commission, much like the UK have, and that would have hopefully a little bit of control over what the government is doing. Currently, what it's doing is trying to avoid anything that reduces, reduces our profits from the fossil fuel industry, it would seem. And yes, if we can reduce emissions on the way, maybe that's a good thing, they think. So the New South Wales government has a zero net plan, which is good. Need federal long-term framework for achieving net zero emissions. We can't put pressure on China and India and other big emitters if we are not doing enough ourselves, and we're a big emitter. So the current Climate Change Authority, who published this very graph that I have here, which is debated and disputed by the government themselves, they're clearly not listening to the Climate Change Authority. We need something stronger. The bill is a very important thing to support. In appreciating our politicians, I'm cutting into time here. Sorry, I'm taking too long. We should commend the cooperative approach that has been put in place for the bushfire and COVID-19 responses that have happened. There is cooperation happening there. We need the same level of cooperation for climate change action. How can similar collaborative approach be taken? Well, we think that the Parliamentary Friends of Climate Action is an important one. The bushfires and COVID-19 have amplified anxieties. It's grown the desire within the general population. We've had 800 new members so far this year, which is fantastic. And so we think that that's an important thing to stress, and we need to encourage our politicians to understand that, yes, Australia is behind what they do on climate change, behind what they should be doing on climate change. Technology solutions. Well, technology solutions, Ross Garnaut has put together a lot of good ideas in his book, Superpower, how in Australia can be the superpower of renewable energy and get away from the non-renewable stuff. Drawdown is another good source of technology solution ideas. 100 solutions, which Paul Hawken readily admits is not a total solution. If we did all of those things, though, we would have a good chance of actually nipping the worst of it in the bud. Technologies exist already and new ones will come. Costs are all that's standing in the way of those new technologies taking off. And at the moment, the playing field is not level. With subsidizing fossil fuels to the level we are, we really need to change things. So I hope that 2020 will be a year for clearer vision, that the drought, fires, bleaching, floods, virus, and all the other things that are happening will actually have raised the issue to the level we will get things happening. Property losses, insurance costs, the economy is starting to be impacted, and we need them to see that future costs, future benefits are worthy of current day costs. People can perceive perhaps now what 2+ degrees will bring, and it's not good. So we need to work on that. We need to show these solutions, and we need to convince the powers that be. We can't wait for elections or revolutions to turn things around. We can't wait for a few years. We have to have this happen now. And so we all want the same future. We need to make democracy work. Thank you.